Well, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the election today. Maybe one of the most consequential elections of our lifetime. Definitely a lot of things we've already covered, but with respect to its irregularities and the weird stuff that's gone on. But as we're looking at the final map, Lucas, how much have you had a chance to check in recently? As far as I see the polling, we're still kind of all over the place. No real consensus as to who's going to win this election, but I've seen Polymarket swing in favor of Trump, and then a recent poll came out in Iowa that said maybe Trump doesn't have Iowa, and if he doesn't have Iowa, then there's a chance that it doesn't go the right direction. But I see on this map, Iowa is back to in Trump's camp here.
I mean, from my from my perspective, I would imagine Trump is going to win in a landslide. Um, I don't know how much I ever believed in polls, and especially in the last 4 years, how much I would believe in any poll. Just looking around and seeing the ruralness of Iowa, seeing the support that Trump is getting in New Mexico, which is usually very, very blue. And like I also see on this map that you have that Texas is pink. What? I, I don't believe that for a second. In the Panhandle, I would guess that Trump there will be counties that Trump takes with 100% of people. Okay, not incredibly populous, but it gives you an idea. And certainly the electoral college it, it gives more power um, to the rural or the smaller populous states. So I the thing that I've been thinking about in the last couple of days was like there is this narrative that no election means more. Maybe it does so in terms of censorship, but um, I, I worry about. I've been more and more focused on our wars in Ukraine and Israel. The United States just sent 5 bombers to Israel, um, or to Qatar to threaten Iran. So that has been a larger issue in my mind. It's amazing to me that the campaigns are Harris and Trump are aligned on those issues.
I'm looking at some of the states that are considered a toss up. So these tan ones are considered a toss up, right? So again, we get to have Georgia in play, Wisconsin. This feels like a retread of a lot of stuff that happened in 2020. Not to discount what you just kind of went off and said, but I'm still enamored with looking at the map. Sorry, I'm a little distracted with it. Still just trying
No,
to
no,
see
no.
that.
That's fine because it is. I do think it's important to look at, and not only that, I also caught up on some of Trump's interviews, and I don't know. Did you happen to hear his Tucker interview when he raked John Bolton through the coals? John Bolton and Liz Cheney through the coals.
I caught the one that recently happened on Joe Rogan. That's the last big long form interview that I caught. I wanted to catch the Vance one, but I just didn't have time. Some life got in the way of my ability to catch up on long form interviews. Although I'm going to say it again, after having listened to that Rogan interview, I don't understand how this dementia thing is in play at all. It just feels like there's such a disconnect between mainstream media and the boots on the ground reality. I just doesn't make any sense. This narrative does not play when you can have somebody sit down for 3 hours, have an uncut interview, and just consistently hold a conversation over that period of time. I know people who have dementia, and that's not what it's like to sit down for 3 hours with someone with dementia.
Well, when Trump sat down with Tucker Carlson, and it was, I believe, I'm not, I'm, there's such a flurry right now. I'm not even sure what the days are. He came to Albuquerque one morning, had a big rally in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And that evening he was in Phoenix or Tucson, somewhere in Arizona. And he had a long discussion with Tucker Carlson live at that event. And he's certainly not only incredibly coherent, he's relaxed, and he revealed cards, and not only that, the things that he said about John Bolton and Liz Cheney. And if you're not familiar with John Bolton, there is no policymaker who is more of a war hawk than John Bolton. And
Yeah,
he
wasn't it John Bolton? He was the one that they told him to get out of there, right? That was the country that he was in recently, and they told him to take a hike. They didn't want him there.
I don't, you know what, I didn't catch that, but I
Okay,
will.
let me see if I can find that because
Oh,
that was a
look
great
for
little
it,
clip.
and look for a picture of John Bolton, because Trump sits down with Tucker and he says, that John Bolton's such an idiot, but useful, because he's so angry. He's angry like a baby, and he said all I had to do was take him with me to the discussions with Putin and Kim Jong Un, and they would say, "Who are these crazy Americans?"
Well, the thing you got to remember about John Bolton is he's got the mustache of like the Lorax. So that's how I remember this guy. It's my little mnemonic trick is oh yeah, it's John Bolton, the Lorax. He's got
It's
that
he's
orange mustache.
Adolf Hitler with bleach. Um,
Adolf Hitler had a shorter mustache, so I think it was not so wide. And this guy's almost got the droop going, so he needs to get a little wax and twirl it a bit.
I mean, okay, fine. Bleach, and conditioner product or of some kind. No, so he says of John Bolton, he calls him a baby, an angry baby, an
Come on,
idiot.
how is that not the same mustache? Look at that.
Uh,
See, look, the Lorax, right?
you
John
know, I
Bolton.
I
It's the
I
same picture. It's the same
yeah,
picture.
okay. Theodore Geisel, Dr. Seuss is weeping now that you have compared the Lorax to John Bolton. Um, But Trump also took some flack for the comments that he made about Liz Cheney, but he wasn't. He was using a metaphor. He said Liz Cheney, put her in front of all these barrels. What he was talking about was the intentions of all these countries that she wants to, and these war hawks want to go and have a fight with and to control with the United States military, United States force. Um, so I did enjoy. Maybe it's great to listen to JD Vance, but he's eloquent. The things that Trump was saying in his sit down with Tucker Carlson, um, were as authentic and earnest and honest as any politician that I have ever heard. And that he was so forthcoming about his about the inadequacies, the realities about people that he had dealt with in his last administration was striking to me. And not only so, on top of all of that, he even goes into and describes the weave. Have you ever heard him describe the weave?
The weave is that conversational style, as far as what I'm understanding. It doesn't have anything to do with his haircut. I know that.
Right. Yeah, it's not his hair. It's not his hair. It's his conversational style. I didn't know that he had ever addressed or talked about his conversational style, but he jokingly goes into it, Donald, with Tucker at some point, and he says, "You have to forgive me, but I have all these points that I have to give in, and as long as I get back to your point, I can talk about whatever I want, and here are the other things I'm going to talk about." And he goes on and proceeds with his weave, and I thought, in light of these accusations that of that he's old and losing his mind, he just basically addressed it. And not only that, it's great to see him incorporate all of his talking points and be humorous. He's funny. I mean, we've talked about it before. I'm amazed at how at at, at what a great comedian, at his at not just his humor, but he's got timing, and he reads a crowd incredibly well. So it's a good interview. It also said to me that he's incredibly comfortable right now. I would imagine he expects to win, and ex, there's also the size of these rallies is I couldn't believe the amount of people who went to see him in Albuquerque. Again, New Mexico, usually very, very blue. Um, so uh, maybe it's going to be a tighter race. I don't know. But to me, it seems like Trump has really broken out in the last couple of weeks. He's got RFK. RFK is now also saying to all of his supporters, vote for Donald Trump. He'll vote for me. Um, and I don't know what you think about that, but I'm both not surprised and I'm also impressed with the amount of the issues that Bobby raised with regards to the pharmaceutical industries um, and make America healthy again. That Trump has really begun to highlight in his campaign.
Yeah, a
Anyway,
couple things there. So I was mistaken. It wasn't Bolton. It was Blinken. They got such similar names, like the same Warhawk kind of stuff, and it was Poland kicking them out. This is what I was thinking of. I'm sure you remember seeing this.
no, Poland kicked out Antony Blinken. Poland
Oh,
did.
yeah, check this out. Polish lawmaker, this Grzegorz Braun tells U.S. Secretary of State Blinken to leave Poland. We don't
Oh,
want you here.
but that wasn't Poland's government's position. That was
No,
that.
no, no, no. It was just this one guy. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and good for him. I applaud him. Um, yeah. This was.
So the weave is actually interesting to kind of go to that point. This is not something that is indicative of someone who has dementia, but rather the opposite. That's it. I would substantiate that. It's harder to go and dodge in and out of multiple different points, circle back around this particular topic and hold it in your mind and answer it. Like it's easy to lose your train of thought. You hear this in conversation all the time. Be like, what was I just talking about? How did we start on this point of conversation? And it's a rare person that can say, oh, well, we started here and then we talked about this, then we talked about that. That requires you to hold a tremendous amount of threads of conversation within your mind and not forget about where the conversation has been and circle back around it. So if this is what Donald Trump refers to as the weave, and it sure seems to me what he means, that is not indicative of dementia in any way.
It, far from it, because not only does he remember the point to get back to, and it is difficult whenever you're actually in a conversation. How many times do you get in a conversation with somebody and say, "What were we talking about?" But Donald Trump not only gets back to the original point, but he has a litany of other points that he wants to make, and this was the way that he broke out of the artificial, the contrivance in media and in media questions. It's why he has exasperated journalists for so long. But it's brilliant, and now that he also has gained the confidence of so many of Americans, half of America roughly, he's much more relaxed in his conversation, and it's really nice to see him relaxed on a stage and sharing some of his tactics, as well as joking with the audience and the likes of Tucker. Um,
I've never seen Polymarket changing as fast and in real time as this. Look at this. Like this is just absolutely real time of how the election is being predicted. And I mean that to me that's a margin of victory. I'd be shocked if it doesn't actually play out this way.
yeah, this will be interesting, and I've wondered, because we do know that some people have tried uh, to to toy with the Polymarket odds.
To manipulate this, I think we got some information about there was a big whale in France or something that's been betting on this, right?
Was it in France? Um,
Thought so. Let me see if I can pull that up. Rusty probably saw that one.
yeah, and I remember they tried to manipulate it at some point, but uh, I don't know. It will be very interesting, somewhat like, I don't know, Nate Silver in 2008 or whatnot, to see how these predictions hold. Um, I'm expecting a bigger, a larger margin of a win for Trump. But again, I live in an area where where it's essentially all Trump land. You know, very rural, very Republican, if not conservative.
Yeah, here's a post about this on X where they're talking about the Polymarket whale.
Well, I wonder who it was. Um, what did you think? We could talk about more about Polymarket, but what did you
Well,
think?
let's go back to this election thing for a second. So, I with respect to Kennedy, yes, this is a change, and I don't know how widely this has been disseminated because for a while it was, hey, look up what state you're in. If you're solidly red, you should be voting for Kennedy. If you're in a blue state, you should be voting for Trump. And there was a lot of this guidance around how to vote in the upcoming election to support Kennedy and support what was going on. And you're right. I heard Kennedy say very distinctly, and I think we covered this on the show last week, where he says, nope, just vote for Trump straight across the board. You know, looking at my map, there's no way, like, I don't know if you ever looked at the election politics in Minnesota. I can't imagine that this isn't as hard blue as possible. This is just baffling to me. Like anybody that put this at light blue, this to me says you don't know what you're talking about. Minnesota has not gone in a statewide race for anything other than a Democrat in so long. Like it's a joke to even run for those offices. So trying to win a Senate seat, governor, any statewide office, such as I don't know, like what are some of the like some of the statewide offices. I think maybe it's Attorney General of the state of Minnesota. That's a statewide race. Like none of those have gone for a Republican in so long that it's yeah. There's no way that light blue is the right answer here. Like,
Well, did
but
you happen to see Kamala get busted for, or the Harris campaign get busted for running targeted Facebook ads towards the Muslim community, and I believe a lot of them in Minnesota and Michigan, and Jewish communities in other areas of the country.
yeah, there were those differential ads. I recall that happening. Yeah, that was pretty wild.
Well, I wonder how that is going to. I wonder if that's going to drive both of those camps of voters from the Harris campaign. You know, it's one thing to tell a group of people that you know you have a different way of seeing it, or um, uh, you know that I to be caught lying to two separate groups of people in such a way, and with the same speech, I was taken aback. I could not believe that that the Harris campaign could be so stupid, quite honestly. Um,
Or is it brazen? Something like that. It's
brazen, stupid, brazen, whatever it is. You know, they've had an unbelievable inability to be authentic. So I don't know. Maybe you know my opinion is the most important issue, um, because the campaigns are aligned in the war issues, or I don't know. Maybe they're not. It was certainly heartening to hear Donald Trump throw John Bolton under the bus and the quote unquote war hawks. But the censorship issue is the other one that is incredibly, I believe, very incredibly important. Um, and when I see those videos put out in such a way, you can only imagine that they thought that, or they were living in a world in which they had so much control over what people see across the nation that that was not going to be communicated between those groups of people or those
well,
areas.
and up until very recently, they did have that ability. That's I'd say one of the foundational reasons why Elon Musk stepped in and bought this platform is because there was just too much of that kind of crap going on, and it finally got exposed how much it was being manipulated. I think we've got a clip of Hillary Clinton saying that she laments the fact that they've got to got to get control of these platforms. Like, it's pretty wild, some of the stuff that people will just say straight out in public.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable that they are now openly talk so much about controlling speech. Um, did you happen to catch the New Hampshire debate with Lily Williams?
This debate happened this weekend.
Yes, it happened this weekend. There's a clip on it rolling around X. I watched a little bit of that debate and a couple of others, and I thought it also very much a sign of, I don't know, groundswell of populism. Lily Williams sort of breaks the script, really launches into her opponent, a Democrat who rented an apartment in New Hampshire, lives in Washington, D.C. I believe she's Jake Trapper's wife, um, and is running in New Hampshire. And Lily Williams,
Is it this one?
that is it.
Yeah.
She very, very emotional, just a very, and to me, a very appealing emotional plea for uh, calling out somebody with worth 20-30 million dollars for pretending to not only pretending to live in New Hampshire, but also pretending to understand the problems of middle class and lower class Americans who are facing inflation and more inflation. So, yeah, you can see her really digging in right there.
So the other interesting thing happening over the weekend, and I know that you're followed this somewhat carefully, and at the surface, I think this topic seems, I don't know, funny or something like to some people, but to me, it's not funny at all, and it's just what our government does repeatedly. And I think it's actually a really good place to teach young children. Like, so if you have young children, this is a good way to talk to them about what the government really does, right? I clearly we're talking about Peanut the squirrel. This one is an absolute like nightmare scenario for the government. This is so bad PR. And to me, the first thing I thought of was Breonna Taylor, because essentially what just happened to Peanut has happened to humans. And so it's an easier way to talk about it, because you have this cuddly animal that's been on TikTok for 7 years, suddenly is killed by the government in a very brutal way, in a way that makes almost no sense to anybody. And if you use that as a wedge and you say, look at what the government has done here. Now you say, well, could this happen to you in your own home? And then you just say, well, yeah, it happened to Breonna Taylor. It's like no knock warrant goes wrong, human's dead because of government, just like complete, inability to do things correctly. And like, what's the real recourse here? You're dead.
Well, there was a lot. Yes, I thought about Breonna Taylor. About mainly, I thought about the protections of home. We talk about property rights in America, and sometimes that argument has taken place in garages and in the front yards of Americans. But um, there is a notion that we can retreat to someplace of privacy, and this is about at its core is about privacy. And the government for quite some time has I mean, listen to the remarks that Ketanji Brown Jackson made earlier with regards to how inconvenient the First Amendment is for the federal government, how inconvenient privacy is for the government, but it was intended to be so. And it's mind numbing to think that something so insignificant as a pet squirrel, that that anyone thought it was a good idea to go and to invade the privacy of a family, to seize a pet and to kill that pet. And not, it wasn't just a squirrel, it was also Fred the raccoon. um, Unbelievable, unbelievable. Like what at what point did, and not only that, did you also see that these were from complaints from, I believe, a woman in Texas who was upset that this social media account that they had was a more popular social media account than hers.
I think that's called swatting when that happens, right?
I think you're exactly right. But we it's a tricky line to be in local government or be in the states and have the authority, like supposedly with a warrant, to be able to invade the privacy in someone's home. That it was done for a squirrel, for a pet, is unbelievable. um
I, sometimes we complain about how slow justice moves, but in some ways, justice moves too fast. I mean, you have a complaint like this. What is the real duty of local government here? You talk about it all the time when you know your neighbors, when you know who's in your community. I mean, how hard would it have been to just go talk to this guy a little bit and say, we got this complaint. Can you come in? Can you answer some questions? Like, is it really appropriate to send in jackbooted thugs with guns to tear this guy's house apart? I mean, is that really the right thing to do here? What's the real harm? What's the maximum harm that could be done to society? It's one thing if you accuse somebody of, I don't know, cooking meth, building a nuclear reactor in their garage, something that could seriously harm everybody else. But like, what is the possibility of real harm here? And I mean, what is the appropriate use of force, or what was the responsibility of each player that was involved in this, from the agents that were asked to do this? There are a variety of people that could have said, well, wait a minute, are we really doing the right thing here? Or even calling for a little bit of sanity the day of. Who was the captain that coordinated the raid on this place? Like, say, what are we doing here, guys? Like, we're going in here, we're going to get a squirrel and a raccoon. And how do you, with a straight face, tell your team this is what you're doing? And what's the appropriate use of force? Like, what are the rules of engagement? I mean, seriously? Like, can you imagine being one of the guys that's there and saying, we're going to get that squirrel?
Well, this is in part why I'm very wary of police versus sheriffs, because I would imagine a sheriff or a sheriff's deputy would have said, "I'm not going to do that." And the beauty of a sheriff versus a policeman, or a deputy versus a policeman, is they're imbued with the decision for which laws to enforce. Law enforcement or police groups have to follow the politicians that tell them what to do. When I look at this, I'm most disgusted with the judge. The judge had time to consider this and to look into the complaint that was made. Questions that I have is, why does somebody in Texas get on the internet and decide that they don't like something, and to call a judge or to file a complaint thousands of miles away, and that complaint is given credibility?
Well, why wouldn't the judge say, all right, you want to have this complaint? Show up in front of my bench. Be here in 3 days.
I well, the plaintiff.
Right? I mean,
If
why not just call the person in? Like, the
well,
judge
I don't.
definitely has the ability to do that. He'd be like, come in here. You got 3 days to show up. If you don't, I'm just going to toss this. Like,
No,
totally.
I
The,
would say
the
that.
judge has that discretion, the ability to do that.
Well, the judge should have said, this person doesn't live here. This person is not actually physically affected by any of like concerns about, if they were actually concerned about rabies, then they could have asked questions with, one, is it a neighbor? Is it someone immediately adjacent to 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 the family that has this pet? No. Two, is the family doing anything to make sure that uh, that they're controlling their pet? Like, we're talking about a squirrel and a raccoon. It's also interesting that they're exotic pets, but these are the same issues that we have with pets every day. Like instead of talking about a squirrel and a raccoon, let's talk about a dog. If you put a picture of your dog on Instagram, does somebody from another state and thousands of miles away get to call and swat you? That's exactly what it was. Swat you under the supposed fear and the authority under public safety, to have some concern about that. The judge should have won, either thrown the case out or turned around to the family and said, did you want to counter sue? Because this is abuse of the privilege of allegation.
It brings me to a point that I wanted to bring up that I've been really noticing a lot in this election. And it's the fact that the opposite party is the enemy. Like, I think I saw a post on X where somebody was wearing a Trump shirt at an NFL game, and they're trying to make him take off his shirt at the NFL game. And it was not allowed for him to have a shirt just because it said Trump on it. And I've been seeing a lot of these reports where, people are tearing up signs in people's yards or getting in fights with people on the street. And it goes to show that it's just this narrative that they're putting on where if you're not with the party of my choice, then you're my enemy. And if you look at this guy's little side bio about him, he puts in there that he's a MAGA supporter and a Trump supporter. And I think a lot of this could have been just somebody trying to find some way to attack them just because of what they're supporting.
I think you're 100% on the right track there. I think half of the things that occur like this are some sort of retaliatory. I'm a big proponent of that. Most of the time when people run afoul of some kind of something that happens to them, whether they're in some kind of a violent crime or they're in some sort of an altercation, that oftentimes this is because they're into some particular thing that causes them to have this happen. If you randomly hear about some person getting murdered, it's like, well, they were probably into drugs and you just didn't know about it. And something like this, where you have some random thing that happens, I think it's absolutely politically motivated. It has to be. Like, what other purpose after 7 years of this being online, this being commonly or out there, why is it suddenly that this occurs? It's the jealousy of another internet account, sure, but also we've got this highly contentious election and just trying to find any way that you can to lash out at people, and swatting people is a way that this has happened repeatedly. It's happened a lot. And I think it's the people who have the discretionary power have to be held to a much higher standard. I would love to see the judge be held accountable for this, because this is absolutely inappropriate, what he has done here.
I think, again, this is why I think juries are important, and juries should be able to hold judges and lawyers, advocates of the court, in contempt of court.
Is that possible here in any way? Can this judge ever really be held to account for what's occurred? Or is that not, is there really no place in our system to?
I mean, unfortunately, and this is what dismays me too, that we have so much concern, that we talk about losing our freedoms through the legislative process, and we talk about taxes, when in fact the branch of government that has assumed autonomy and can do whatever they want without any check is the judicial branch. I don't know if this judge is appointed or is elected. Most people don't pay that much attention to the elections of judges anyways, and that has to go to the capture of the judiciary by the guild, by the legal guild, the bar associations.
So could a complaint be lodged with the bar association?
I mean,
judge?
Yeah, and maybe it would be nice to see this judge be disbarred, but that's not the way that it should be handled. That the bar association is a guild; it's a private organization. Why do we not have?
I think we got to do an entire episode on this, because this to me is fascinating. I know you've said these kinds of things before, but I don't know that we've really dug into it. I don't really understand what you're talking about when you say that the bar association is a guild or any of this. I thought that they were, appointed officers of the court, and that was under the jurisdiction of the government. But it sounds like it maybe isn't exactly that.
The that we have backtracked into some sort of notion that you have to have a law degree to represent yourself in court. The idea some of the greatest ideas in the American experiment had to do with everyone participating in not only the legislative process but also the judicial process. And this is why juries are so important. Look at the Bill of Rights. We have amendments about the right to a trial by jury, the right to a fair and speedy trial, and nowhere, people talk about Miranda rights and you have the right to have legal counsel, et cetera, et cetera. This is a whole backslide into the licensing, because you think about it. I mean, also go back to our early presidents and Andrew Jackson, Abraham Lincoln. They didn't go to law school. And now you have to go to law school in order to get a license, in order to represent somebody. That's a guild. That doesn't empower regular citizens. And the way to check that is not asking members of the guild to check each other, lawyers and judges. Let's get that person disbarred. That's not the way to do it. The way to do it is to turn back to juries and say, why is it that we do not have an expectation that a jury can not only hold a witness who's summoned into a court into contempt, but also the advocates who are supposed to be representing justice? Because the just like I said, a sheriff is a law enforcement, the coercion of the law physically embodied by a person. Part of the understanding of keeping America out of the hands of government, or out of the capture of a select group of people, was this notion that you could go out and you could randomly select citizens, and for a brief amount of time they could decide as to what was the actual law of the land.
Yes, but in this case you have more of an administrative function, right? I mean, this jury probably wouldn't have been the right thing to do here.
Why not? How like what? Because we've accepted these notions of like how difficult it's going to be. Like, look at the jury selection process. What a joke. And that like they have to physically show up. What if for every issue that came in front of a quote unquote judge, that the judge had to to find 12 peers, and those 12 peers could immediately decide, throw this out. If the complaint that was lodged to that judge had to go between 12 people who lived in the jurisdiction of Peanut the squirrel and Fred the fox, I can't remember what the man's name is. Even if they had approved the warrant, we'd sure be taking it differently than one judge made the decision that this was an acceptable invasion of privacy.
Fair point. I look forward to a point in the future where these things are more facilitated by technology. I actually think this could be done. I mean, think about like how hard would it be to actually make this a possibility where you wouldn't actually need to summon these people into a place, sequester them for days and days on end, but rather you could do some of this by technological means. I mean, no business requires you to summon everybody into the same room anymore. That's why we have video conferencing. We have a lot of stuff like this. So why couldn't something like this occur in a much more streamlined fashion? There's something there. The company or technology platform that solves this kind of stuff, I think will really be onto something. But it would still require the buy-in of these centralized powers and authorities. And the way judges exist now, they're these mini little kings. I imagine they're not that interested in giving up that power.
Well, the news report that I've been looking for years is for the foreman of a jury to call the judge into contempt. Like I couldn't believe the audacity and the brazenness of the judge in the Tina Peters trial. I never had hoped so much that a citizen of the United States would understand the power.
How would you imagine that playing out? So the foreman of the jury gets up and says, we find this thing, blah, blah, blah. And not only that, but we find that the judge's actions in this case to be reprehensible. Bailiff, please escort him in chains out of the courtroom.
Yeah.
Do you think the bailiff would actually do that? Is that possible?
I do believe so. Notice that when we talk about court and who the bailiff works for the court. The judge and the defense and the lawyers that represent the plaintiff and the defendant, they are advocates of the court. The jury is the embodiment of the law. The foreman of a jury, if a judge like that, a jury, you see this going back to our conversation with David last week. You see this with politicians. Part of the problem is that the advocates of a court engage in a lot more legal practice than citizens who are summoned into a jury. But that's a power in knowledge, but not in position. And a jury, even going back to our conversation with Nathan and this stupid ass prosecutor in Minnesota who thought that they were going to prosecute a member of a jury because the jury decided that they didn't like the law and that they didn't disagree with the facts of the case, but they were gonna hang the jury. He couldn't do anything about it. And the protections that are given to a jury, they have the greatest protections. I don't know that you could ever come up with a case of a juror being turned around and being prosecuted for any decisions that were made as a part of a jury. That's called a hung jury.
Well, I think we've got to set up for a great episode. So we'll have to see if we can get Nathan back. I know he's in the midst of a election cycle, but after Tuesday, likely we'll have some clarity about what's going to happen for him. But I imagine he'll then be free to speak about these types of things, because I would love to talk a bit more and just have an episode where we dig into the particulars of how the jury system actually works, the powers of the members of the jury and the jury foreman. I think these things are all pretty fascinating and pretty hard to get access to that type of information. Even looking at the Wikipedia article here, Lucas, I think you have an edit that needs to be made, my man, because this does not say that the jury foreperson has any sort of the powers that you've laid out, and so this needs a slight amendment and some annotations.
I guarantee you it was written by a lawyer. I don't know that it's ever happened. But when it happens, what is a judge to do? Judge can't turn around and throw out the jury.
It'd be an interesting day in court. Maybe in some small town in Colorado would be the first place for it to occur.
Oh, I'll tell you. When we have the conversation about juries, I'll tell you about a small town in Colorado deciding that they didn't need a lawyer from 150 miles away, like pretending to be the judge of the town, and how things worked out differently to turn into the town and say, let's have somebody that's local and that knows the people of the town that's sitting there on the bench as a juror. And the lawyers got upset about that, but the bar association and the legal profession is exactly that, a profession, and it walks a very, very, very thin line in especially when taking money. This is a whole nother episode, and we're well over time. We'll dig into this later. My condolences to the family of of everyone whose privacy has been invaded by the government and our broken judiciary system.
Yeah, and definitely look into this when you want to have a discussion with your kids. It's one thing to try to have a conversation and say they murdered Breonna Taylor on a no-knock warrant that went bad. It's another thing entirely to talk about the poor defenseless squirrel and raccoon that were killed by the government. So it's a better wedge in. You can have a little bit more easy conversation about some cuddly animals, and then you can take that to the next level and say, how might this else go wrong? It's definitely a good conversation to talk about the relationship of citizens of this country to law, to law enforcement, what law enforcement is really supposed to do. And we'll definitely have that episode about what the judicial system really looks like. I'm looking forward to that one. But yeah, we'll catch you tomorrow. Remember, on election day, there was some guidance from Bobby Kennedy, so you might want to go check that out. Get better informed there. And yeah, we'll see you tomorrow.